possibly be on Mars, and nobody would believe me if I said I'm invited to go to Mars. And there's serious technologies, and the people that are behind recruiting me have incredible technologies and a serious mission to get there.
As a 6-year-old, I first teleported with my late father, Raymond F. Bishago, who was one of the project principals. And beginning in the very beginning of the summer there of 1981, Courtney Hunt was asking me a question I really didn't want to be asked, and that question was, so tell me, do you want to go to Mars? And then in the late June of 1981, I said, why should I go? Why are you asking me to go to Mars? And he said, because the survival of human life depends on it. I'm speaking out now for 2 reasons. One is we're going to be needing this technology to save our civilization. So I think that's important a reason enough. People, I think, also have a human right, a birthright to a true telling of the natural history of the solar system that we inhabit.
Is not this dangerous for you to speak about all this?
Yes, and I've realized since the inception of my investigation that I might be assassinated for carrying out my investigation of such a sensitive topic. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Teleportation has been used since at least around 1980 to place human personnel on Mars. Why do I know that? I know that because I participated in later activities in which that is what we were doing. When I was trained on Project Pegasus, that they were utilizing 140 American school children.
Was it dangerous for children?
Yes, it was new, dangerous, and experimental when we began teleporting. So they were actually training us to contingency plan for the possibility that we might be lost in time, which was a very fearsome thing to contemplate for those of us in the program. We were concerned about literally leaving this time and being stuck in another one. One, they wanted to test the mental and physical effects of teleportation on children. 2, they had these electro-optical devices called chronovisors that prompted moving holographic images of past and future events. The third purpose is that they knew that children are exceptionally accurate in their observations, or at least they tend to be much more accurate than what adults report that they're seeing. Their perceptions are not influenced in the way that adults' perceptions are by the selection bias of what they have previously experienced. The fourth reason, and that which we were most excited about, is they told us that in adulthood, we would be admitted to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, and that would be used as a pretext to involve us in future time travel activities, that we were being trained to become America's first cadre of chrononauts in a secret program that would run parallel to the U.S. space program.
Could Nikola Tesla's experiments been successful? We are convinced of that today. We believe it is possible to teleport a human being successfully without injury. We have proof that scientists have been working on teleportation for at least 30 years and have been successful on at least 2 occasions. The first was almost 20 years ago when a photon was teleported at a distance of 800 meters. And the second occurred in 2016 when scientists from China and Canada managed to teleport photons through fiber optics between the 2 countries. The good news is that in 2017, the same scientists in China were able to take a photon to space and use the quantum method for teleportation of the photon. However, there are reports that the United States Army has been using teleportation for a few decades now, but this has not been confirmed by the Armed Forces of America. We have heard that Army scientists have managed to teleport a fully equipped group of 9 soldiers from the United States Army Natick Soldier Systems Center, SSC, to a training site in Germany. The SSC is a military research complex installation in Natick, Massachusetts. The 9 volunteers had completed individual advanced training and were participating in experiments using the Doriot Environmental Climate Chambers at SSC when they disappeared and moments later materialized in the Hydra Sever training site in Germany, completely unharmed. The chambers can replicate any climate's environment or time zone in the world, but they had never been used in this way before. Teleportation was made famous in the Star Trek television series and movies. The Army called the process the Natick Incident, a hypothetical way of moving objects from place to place. American writer Charles Fort is reported to have coined the word Natick in 1931. Natick officials were enthusiastic about the event that promises to one day revolutionize the way in which United States troops and equipment could be moved or transported around the world. It could also ultimately make overseas bases obsolete, as forces would move from U.S. soil to remote points of conflict in the blink of an eye. Nobody is more impressed by this than I am, said Benjamin Storm, 61, who manages Natick's climate chambers. One moment he was chatting with the young soldiers, and the next they all vanished in the air. The soldiers were dressed in combat gear for the revolutionary experiment and supervised by Storm and his colleagues when they were sent from one continent to another. Photographs of the chambers from the event were captured and have been revealed by the Army. After thorough medical examinations at an Army hospital, they flew back to the United States and returned to their duties at Natick. It's one thing to see Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock do it in the movies, but it's something else when it happens to you in real life, said Kelly McCoy, one of the teleported soldiers. I felt a little tingling, and the next thing I knew, I was in Bavaria, Germany. I always wanted to visit Europe, but I thought I would go by plane. Benjamin Storm and other Natick researchers are now poring over mountains of data and research in hopes of duplicating teleportation. Meanwhile, the Army quickly established a teleportation study task force, which will be based on Natick. Leading scientists from private industry and academia from around the globe are gathering at the client chambers at SSC in Massachusetts to provide whatever help they can. According to Storm, a device similar to the flux capacitor seen in the Back to the Future movies was used during the experiment. This led to immediate speculation that the U.S. Army was also working on time travel, but it is believed that in order for time travel to work, they would have to generate 1.21 gigawatts, not a trivial feat. Storm is quoted as saying, "We are only concerned with place, not the time. This development could change the course of human history," Storm said with a gleam in his eye. This story, like Andrew Basiago's claims, could be science fiction. However, the stories could also be true. Today, it isn't possible to confirm them as authentic. Only time will tell if teleportation is possible in the 21st century.
What are we doing trying to fund teleportation when it's existed for 40 years? I'm not lying. I can give you the names of the locations we were taken to where events, time travel activities occurred. I can give you the name and describe the structure and function of the devices. I'm giving the name not only of project insiders whose names will show up in government records as a result of entering certain facilities or having security badges and so forth. I can give you the names of their friends in places like New Mexico and New Jersey who were aware of what was going on.
The question we ask is, why were children used for this experiment? We asked Andrew Basiago that question.
Nikola Tesla found a way to create an apparatus that draws radiant energy from the time-space continuum. Radiant energy is a form of energy that he discovered. It is latent and pervasive in the universe.
According to Andrew Basiago, who practices law in Portland, Oregon, his father was a scientist who worked with the CIA and was involved in teleportation experiments in the early 1960s.
My father and I first jumped through a Tesla teleporter in Building 68 at the old Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, sometime between September of 1967 and September of 1968. We know that because we arrived in the state capitol complex in Santa Fe. The teleport would open up a tunnel in the time-space continuum. You would find yourself moving through it, and when the tunnel closed, you would find yourself elsewhere on the surface of the planet.
Andrew Basiago only traveled in the Tesla transporter when he was a child. Years later, he did it again. But on that occasion, the CIA career officer Courtney Hunt, cousin of Howard Hunt, one of the Watergate figures, would convince Andrew Basiago to participate in a teleportation program to the planet Mars.
So in July 1981, I met him at the corner of Mason and Devonshire in Chatsworth, California. In his car, we drove to the office building that is at the corner of North Sepulveda Boulevard and Imperial Boulevard, immediately southeast of the grounds of the Los Angeles International Airport. The address of that building is 999 North Sepulveda Boulevard.
Este es el 999 de North Sepulveda Boulevard. Tal y como lo señaló el señor Andrew Basiago, se trata de un edificio de 7 pisos que se encuentra a unos metros del aeropuerto de la ciudad de Los Ángeles. De acuerdo al reporte del señor Basiago, resulta difícil de creer que en este lugar se haya desarrollado la teletransportación directamente hacia el planeta Marte. Sin embargo, lo que él señaló aquí está. Este edificio es ahora propiedad de una compañía de bienes raíces que se llama Kilroy Realty. Este edificio tiene también al menos unos 30 o 40 años de haber sido construido y pues posiblemente renovado. Y de tal manera que sí corresponden los hechos a como lo señala el señor Andrew Basiago. ¿Sería posible entonces que en este lugar hubiera una especie de túnel del tiempo, un túnel dimensional que pudiera conectar y enviar a las personas hasta el planeta Marte? Usted tiene la última palabra, sin embargo la historia es por demás extraordinaria.
And Courtney Hunt was speaking to me through the telecom and saying, "Are you ready?" and so forth. And I finally grew impatient because I wanted to go to Mars. I don't like waiting for things. And I borrowed a line, I believe, that was from Alan Shepard during the space program, which was light some wording from one of the American astronauts, and I said rather impatiently, "Light this candle." I was really growing exasperated. I couldn't tell that much was happening. All that was happening was that panels of light on the top and bottom of the elevator started blinking. And then about 10 minutes into the 20-minute journey to Mars, the entire form of this box-like elevator began to morph and crumple and reposition itself into a cylinder. And when that happened, I had to steady myself in the elevator, such as you would if you're walking through a water main. You know, you're walking in a cylindrical object, so you have to kind of steady yourself. And I saw that the ceiling had become the surface I was looking at, and I could see this sort of swirling pattern. They had opened up a vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space, just as the teleporter did back when I was a child on Project Pegasus. And that lasted for maybe 2 to 4 minutes or so, and then it began, the cylinder, and then it began correcting itself, and then it just completely rectified its original shape. And then about 10 minutes later, as Courtney had described, the door opened, and I walked out into what looked like, if you can imagine sort of the basement of a modern sports arena, the infrastructure of that built into an existing underground cavern of an ancient civilization. There was sort of a big cave in which I could see these modern tension struts, a sort of infrastructure that had been placed inside, and the jump room itself had been placed inside this ancient cavern. I walked through what was clearly the irregular eye sockets of some kind of skull on the surface. I turned around, I could see it was a skull. I could see the rust-red terrain of Mars. I could see that Mars has a pale blue sky. I could see that, or sense rather, that Mars smelt of gunpowder, which must have been some sulfur content, at least at that location.
What is the temperature on Mars? What do they eat on Mars?
It was about 70 degrees. Now, the conventional scientific literature about Mars states either that Mars is prohibitively cold or that Mars has temperate regions that would be survivable by humans. And I turned and I saw a small human being from our civilization on Earth run up to me. And then 2 more individuals a couple years older than me, I would say they were maybe 21, 22, 23 years of age, ran up to me, two men and a woman. And I was interacting with the first individual who ran up to my location. And they were clearly human beings from Earth. They weren't Martians. They looked normal. They were speaking English.
That's one of the bases?
I think it might be a base. What we can say is that this is a detail, it's an enlargement of a segment of one of the glass tubes that have been found in various places on Mars. They seem to be artificial structures that have been built around this ribbing, and then some kind of glassine substance has been extruded across the reinforcements.
The European probe Mars Express shot these amazing photos, evidence of what buildings, terraces, walkways, all in disarray, demolished and ruined by history or calamity. There is some very substantial evidence that could provide meaning and credibility to the story that Andrew Basiago tells. The human figure photographed by the Spirit rover near the Gustav crater is remarkable, as we see in this panoramic shot obtained from the NASA archives. This image was taken between November 6th and 9th of 2007. This female figure was not discovered until it was found in NASA images in 2008.
That photograph has been the subject of widespread global scrutiny because it contains an anomaly that apparently looks like the figure of a human female in a blue dress on the far leftward or southward edge of the home plate plateau. The U.S. government achieved time travel 40 years ago, pardon me, and was using it to reach Mars at least no later than 30 years ago.
I think trillions of dollars are going towards a backup plan instead of the problems at hand to protect our planet, then it's obvious that it's a part of something that does not have our best interests in mind, that is manipulating people to go along with something that goes against their free will, because most of the money also goes into MK weapons. The whole 9/11 thing, the money involved in that was not spoken for before the towers fell, was invested in MK weapons.
And when they were spending those trillions of dollars in America's defense labs, they weren't just making superior forms of nuclear weapons. They were spending trillions of dollars on all manner of technologies that remain secret. Rumsfeld and Governor Richardson to step forward, and I'm asking those two to man up and tell the world the truth, and that is that they were directly involved in the project that I was on. They, as career public servants, actually distinguished public servants, certainly they can now step forward as former cabinet officers and support what I'm saying, because they were direct participants in what the program achieved.
People think this is crazy. They have no idea what is going on. And only those that have been led into these sort of strange corners and experiences can speak on the matter. Or else, you know, they're paying thousands and millions and trillions of dollars to hide it.
My dad was a great guy. Sorry. And then he said, then I want you to tell the whole world, because what we were part of was something great. This is the future, and people deserve to know what we achieved. The time-space pioneer children were not individuals like myself. We were in the second group. The first children to teleport and literally become inhabitants of the time-space age were kids from Latin America.
Do you think it's true what is happening in Mars?
I do, and Andy is such a credible person, and so is Alfred, and I've known them now for, I think, a year or two on this sort of level of discussion, and I don't doubt for a moment anything that Andy says, and I know that he's walked on the surface of Mars.
I don't believe that it's my responsibility to convince people of the truth. I think it's my responsibility to simply stand in my truth and tell it, and so that's why I'm speaking out. And I recognize that that was a privilege, and certainly telling the story of those technical achievements, because of the value that they could bring to our global civilization, is more important than worrying about whether I'm going to be killed or not as a result of coming forward.
Personally, is to be a truth teller, talk about my experience as realistically as I can, and say that I can't say anything for sure. Anything. But the fact that when I came out with my story, I discovered that all these other people had something to say about it, people that are very credible, people that have had their lives kind of taken away from them. You know, even somebody, you know, like Andy, who had this happen starting as a child, who lived to tell the tale, really does add a lot to what I discovered.
Is this dangerous for you to speak about all this?
Yes, and I've realized since the inception of my investigation I might be assassinated for carrying out my investigation of such a sensitive topic. but that's a risk that I'm willing to take. I'm pursuing a cause that I'm not willing to postpone, and I believe that I will prevail at. And that is to inform the people of the world that for 40 years we've had available to us this revolutionary form of transportation that we could use to directly implement to achieve sustainability in the 21st century.